Hello, this is Kurt Gomez in Houston, Texas, and I'd like to welcome you all to your Break It Down show with the guy that we've all come to know and love and my lifelong friend, Pete A. Turner. You know, it's amazing to think that the show is approaching 1,000 episodes. Over the last few years, the show has shown amazing growth, is absolutely contagious, and it can be found everywhere. As podcasts, Facebook and YouTube videos, t-shirts, you can't miss it. It has upgraded equipment, multiple cameras, and hey man, Pete's catchy intros, oh so good. And the guests, out of control crazy. High quality, thoughtful intelligence always makes me say, I never thought about that or even knew about that. So I can't wait to see what the future holds, and I'm super excited that I'll be with it the entire way. Also, remember to head to savethebrave.org and participate in supporting their mission as well as mine by clicking the donate tab and reaching out to a vet. That one little interaction can save a life. So I implore all of you to please do what you can to support the organization, the charity, and our veterans. Yeah, okay. So speaking of guests, and let's get right into it, shall we? Today I'm privileged to be introducing Navy SEAL Clint Emerson and Army combat spy, and guess who? Pete Turner, who today will be bringing their perspectives of current events and past experiences to share with us all. Clint is a retired Navy SEAL of more than 20 years of service. He continues to serve by empowering good people with safety and security skills at home, at work, and abroad. His services have helped Fortune 500 companies, politicians, celebrities, and more, and hopefully all of us today. Pete is a former U.S. Army intelligence and combat spy who spent many years talking to and interacting with the residents of war-torn regions such as Bosnia and Iraq, with the goal of feeding critical information back to Army Command, all the while evading danger at every turn. So Pete, Clint, looking forward to the conversation and turning it over to you.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Clint Emerson, retired Navy SEAL, author of 100 Deadly Skills and some other things.
And I'm Pete A. Turner, guest on You're Watching The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Thanks, Shelley, for doing the hosting for us.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for turning over the mic to me today, Pete. Thanks for being here, Clint. I know you were here recently, and I asked both of these gentlemen to come back and let me turn the tables on them because I think they have some really interesting information for us, the viewers, from maybe a different perspective. So, Pete, again, thanks for the mic. And I know that you are approaching your 1,000th episode. Is that correct?
That's right. 1,000's coming up soon.
Yeah. So congratulations. And before we get started, I just want to do like a little bit of role reversal here. You've sat in this seat for all those episodes. Can you share a story maybe that's happened along the way that maybe one of your unexpected behind the scenes that nobody knew was going on, but you were kind of dancing in the background? Or do you have any stories where somebody said something that was unexpected or happened? Got any fun behind the scenes stories for us?
You know, the behind the scenes things are interesting because we were just doing it ourselves. We were having this great off mic moment where we're talking about writing books and how that business works and exchanging ideas and supporting one another. And so it doesn't matter what industry I'm talking to. You know, we just had J.R. Robinson on, the most recorded drummer ever. If you listen to the radio for 5 minutes, you've literally heard at least one, if not two, of his songs. So you get him off mic and he's just a regular dude, and we're trying to figure out how to help one another. Here I am helping a guy that gets called by Quincy Jones to drum, you know, like, hey, so it's those are the things that are really incredible is you get these powerful friendships started and collaborations, and sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't, but everybody's just in a creative space. And I had no idea. I mean, good things are going to happen, but when these collaborations, germ up and you look and you're like, wow, look at these things, they're growing. It's just it's really neat to be in a positive space where we do that, because there's a whole lot of negative spaces out there.
Yeah, we've seen that recently. What about, have you ever been caught with a hot mic? Didn't know you're on or didn't know you were live? And I don't think you could say anything inappropriate on this show because I've listened to this show. Yeah. So pretty much it's an open, but
There's a new thing that all of these different sites do is they autoplay video, and I'm desperate to try to have it not bleed into the show. And every now and then you'll hear that. That's the biggest pain in the butt thing. Is like I'm trying to cue these things up and bring them into the show, and I don't want the video to play. I just want a link, literally. Like I just want the link to pop in, and the stupid video comes through, and it's exasperating because you just can't shut it up fast enough. You can push stop, you can push mute, and it's like, never mind all that. I'm going to play loud right now. And you're like, yeah. So that's sort of a hot mic moment.
Got it. Clint, I know you do a lot of video. You've gone across the country kind of meeting and filming with the best of the best in their area. Do you have any funny stories where maybe you got your lights knocked out or you had an accident filming? If you have not watched Clint's stuff, you've got to, because it's really cool. Clint, tell us a little bit about what that series was. And then did you have any behind the scenes moments where you got knocked out, literally?
Yeah. So 100 Deadly Skills Combat Edition is a book that's coming out here in the next couple of weeks, but we did a show. I had initially filmed everything on the road of what we were doing. Ended up being 7 terabytes of footage, and then we're like, well, why don't we just turn this into a series and see if someone will buy it? And so we ended up doing a deal with the Warrior Poet Society Network, which is a private streaming network run by a former Ranger, and he's got his own shows, got his own world on there. It's kind of cool. So if you haven't checked out Warrior Poet Society, you should. But anyway, yeah, I mean, while we're on the road, I mean, probably the craziest thing that happened is when this was last May, in mid-May, we were cutting across, where were we? We were cutting across like North Dakota, somewhere in there. It was the middle of the night. We're driving from one badass to another badass, and it was pouring rain. And I remember looking out my front windshield off to the right, and when the lightning hit, I could see this huge funnel cloud.
Oh.
And so this tornado touched down just off the highway, and we were like, whoa. And I've got just this one Netflix camera guy sitting in the back, and he's significantly younger than me. But he basically plasters his face to the side of the window looking, trying to track it. And then we found ourselves literally taking exits and running away from it with some other vehicles because it was coming our way. We were just trying to get distance between this thing. And anyway, we all ended up going, there was a Motel 6, and it was, believe it or not, during that moment in the pandemic, Motel 6 was the only hotels that were open. So
did they leave the light on? Is that the one that leaves the light on for you?
They certainly had the light on, and all the vehicles went into there, and we ran into the lobby, and we all got rooms and just hunkered down there for the night. But it was, that was probably the little more of the pucker factor during that days.
I love it. Well, we're going to kind of move into the meat of the interview here, and we kind of have to reflect on what's just happened recently. And throughout this interview, I'd really like to pull some of your expertise out and apply it to the average person and kind of today's environment. So it's January 7th today. We know what happened January 6th in DC at the Capitol. Taking your security and your situational awareness and your vigilance skills, that kind of disruption can almost happen anywhere these days. And Clint, you just said something that, kind of triggered. You were trying to get space between you and the tornado. Is that the case? I want to hear from both of you. If you find yourself at a concert, at a movie theater, in a mall, at a peaceful rally, and something like that breaks out, what should you do? Yeah, go. Clint.
All right, I'll go first.
Sure, go.
I'm sorry. So social unrest, I've been in it multiple times. And so I took some of the experiences I had and created some easy best practices that anybody could employ. And those are in 100 Deadly Skills book 2. But first and foremost, you want to avoid it altogether if you can. But like in my world, I took a right-hand turn in the middle of the Arab Spring and found myself surrounded by thousands of angry people. And I was in a vehicle. So you have to go, all right, am I in a vehicle or am I on foot? And you kind of break it down from there. But ultimately, you want to avoid it. If you can't avoid it, then you want to parallel it, meaning, get to the borders and go with it until you can find an out, right? That could be a cross street, an alley, a building, a doorway, anything that gets you out of that emotionally charged crowd. You can, going against the grain, I don't recommend it, obviously, for certain reasons, but ultimately you're trying to avoid suffocation injuries and crush injuries. So you've got to look out for the barricades, the walls, the fences, and you want to stay away from those as well. Ideally, you're keeping your hands up and creating space so your thoracic cavity actually has room. It can get really congested at times. And so you want to have your hands up, kind of non-threatening, keeping your space between you and all the others. If you happen to fall to the ground, get up as quick as you can. You do not want to be, part of that, under the feet of a stampede. If you can take high ground, like inside of a building or whatever, then you should. But ultimately, you want to figure out a way to peel off and exit right or left or whatever you can do and get at least 2 or 3 blocks between you and the protest. And probably the single most important thing is looking for and determining those invisible thresholds, right? The thresholds where there's a distance between the people and the barriers, or the distance between the people, the protesters, and law enforcement, right? So because law enforcement isn't going to see you as an innocent person stuck in a crowd. They're going to beat you over the head just like everybody else, especially overseas. So you just want to steer clear from all of it. What happened at the Capitol was obviously horrible. And, you saw they just didn't have enough security. In fact, security was lightened, that day for some unknown reasons. A lot of my buddies work up there. And so, they were like, you would never have anyone with a backpack get that close to the Capitol building on any other day. So there's a lot of parts and pieces, I think, to what happened yesterday that will come out over time that led to, just why it was so easy for them to just barge on in. But those are just some quick tips right off the top of my head.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to hear from you, Pete, but just to kind of rewind what you said, I think naturally people want to turn and go away from it. But if what we're hearing is that you need to go with it so that you're going with the crowd, because you're going to be, fighting all of these people coming at you. And then that was one of my questions too. How do you identify yourself as a non-threatening to law enforcement who sees you as one of many? Is keeping your hands up one of those ways, in addition to keeping, space around you, but it shows that like, I am not here to cause harm. Okay.
Yeah, a non-violent posture will always work to your advantage. I mean, what people don't, most of us may or may not know that 60% of our communication is body language, right? I mean, we talk, but really, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, we look at each other's demeanor, and if someone's going to be threatening or not, and they don't have to speak a word. So yeah, non-threatening posture, whatever that is, usually it's kind of this typical negotiation style. Your hands patting the air. You're not in an aggressive stance. You're not saying anything. Facial expressions neutral. Your behavior, your language, everything is neutral. And hopefully, if you find yourself pushed face to face with law enforcement, they're going to see that, right? They know the difference. They're definitely sensitive to body language, like who's threatening and who isn't, because they're in it every day.
Right. Pete, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I suppose what I would add, and Clint's got all these things down. I totally agree. If you're someone, let's use this protest as an example. If you're going to any protest, you've got to decide, Clint and I, like if we were going to go to a combat zone together, we already know sort of like what our plan is in terms of what's too close for someone for me, and then if they get inside a certain spot, I'm going to act decisively. So that decisive action can just be like, hey, this is getting too crazy. I'm going to move towards the outskirts of this thing. I'm still going to protest, but I'm not going to get caught up in a stampede. I'm not going to find myself excited and running towards the Capitol building. I'm here to protest, and I know clearly like that is not part of what I'm doing, and remove myself from it. Because if you can act ahead of that group's actions, you're probably going to be able to get out fairly easily. And Clint's 100% right. if you like, so I was going to Chico State, and we had a little bit of a riot going on around. They had these, like, we're going to bring back this holiday season that they had banned because we were a bunch of drunks and we always fought everybody. Not me, but just in general in Chico. And so these riots broke out. People were burning couches, they were flipping cars over, and so we went out to go see it. And my roommate got hit over the head with the stick. We'd literally done nothing, but the cops aren't there to sort that out. They don't. If you're out, people that don't want to get hit with the stick act like it. You leave. You get away from that situation. So I would say, if you're trying to stay out of trouble in a large group like that, you don't have to leave the group, but be mindful that these things can get out of hand really quick. Decide what you're comfortable with and get away from that threat when you can. The other thing I would add to this too is by engaging, these officers, like Clint talked about a little bit, engaging them in a positive way when you're able to, might help you out later on when that crowd goes crazy and that person sees you like, that guy's calm, leave him alone. It might help you out when you engage in a positive way ahead of time. So you can be ready if something happens by doing work ahead of time, knowing where your exit route is, knowing what direction everybody's probably going to go, going a different direction, whatever it is, like thinking those things through in a hostile or potentially hostile situation.
So, kind of just sticking with the environment we're in right now, what are some general, each of you give me 2-3 tips of what are some general everyday situational practices that you employ? So when you go to that, you guys are highly trained. I am maybe more so than the average person just because I've been in this space, but what should everybody be doing these days to just make sure they are plugged in to what's going on around them and can pre-act as opposed to reacting in some situations? So again, you guys probably do it second nature, so you might have to think about it a little bit. But if you were going to pass along, 2 or 3 tips to the average person that maybe needs to bring these back top of mind, what would those be?
I kick it off again.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say, like, on the awareness side, a lot of it you can do before you walk out the door. I feel like on your projection and demeanor management, you have to look at how you're dressed. What does it say to people? Does it work for the environment you're going into? Because, if you can be the great person, then you should, and that will eliminate 99% of the issues that you might face out there. If you're one of those that needs to stand out, and, let's face it, our ego dresses some of us in the morning, obviously not me. But if your ego dresses you in the morning and you like to look different than everybody else around you, then that may increase, potential threats that are out there. The other piece, besides projection, demeanor awareness is your own situational awareness, knowing the environment you're going to ahead of time. People kind of, I feel like they define situational awareness a little, not wrong, but just different. What I would say is you have to know the threats in the environment that you're going into so that you can actually look for those, because everyone knows our brains are not computers. They can't aggregate the entire environment and then file all that information into folders and determine, oh, that's a threat, that's not a threat. Because if you're trying to pay attention to everything, then you'll inevitably pay attention to nothing.
Right.
And so you have to kind of know, all right, what am I stepping into, and what are the things that could potentially mess with me? So those are more like awareness, and there's a bunch that goes with all that. And then you have more physical stuff, right? We talked about dress, but then it's like that everyday carry that's become popular over the years. For us, that was your first line gear, right? You got first line, second line, third line stuff, but first line is what you wear and anything that fits in your pockets. So, that's everyday carry. And those are like your self-rescue items for the most part. If you're in a state where carrying guns is cool, then you should. If you can get away with a 5-inch blade or less, then why not? Obviously you need to know how to use these things if you're going to carry them. And that would be, solely for defense. And then you've got, a tourniquet is a great thing. Tourniquets used to be taboo just a decade and a half ago. It was like a last resort. Now it's a first resort, because they've determined in combat that, we can put tourniquets on and leave it on for 96 hours straight, and it does no damage to the limb. So, and knowing the rules of a tourniquet, go high or die. So you're always going to go as high as possible on the limb. crank it down until the bleeding stops and you're good to go. So it's, the first aid aspect has been simplified by allowing tourniquets to become a primary, blood stopper. So, and then there's other, depending on the environment you're going into, can dictate the rest of the items that you carry. But I'll just stop there so that Pete can throw in, his thoughts too.
Yeah, I want to hear Pete's, and then I'm going to come back and I don't want to say challenge you on something, but challenge you on something.
Sure.
Okay, Pete, what are your situational awareness everyday kind of practices?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just try to like back up before like what Clint's talking about. I'm going to want to engage with people, wherever I go. So if we're going to DC to the mall, I'm going to try to, again, talk to people, find out from that DC park cop that you're going to talk to, hey, I see you up there. Appreciate you being up there and keeping us safe. I'm new around here. What does it look like when stuff starts to get out of hand? Like, when do you start to get worried? Because I want to cue on you, because I'm not trying to be a problem. I'm trying to protest, trying to yell and shout. I'm going to wave my sign around, but I'm not trying to cause anybody any harm. And then just, that appreciation for them and that connection that you have. And he'll say, like, just keep an eye on me. If you see me on the horse doing this, or if you see these things, that's a time for you to back away and not be part of the problem, and I would prepare my battlefield in that way. And if you're overseas, it's the same kind of thing. You're trying to engage with locals to find out what's going on. You don't want to make yourself a sucker, but you also, like, when you talk to the shopkeeper where you're buying a sandwich or whatever it is, engage in more conversation about who they are, where they're from, what is it like? I mean, and be complimentary. That's the spy in me. Like, you don't want to be disingenuous, but you want to engage in a way that makes them compelled to talk to you about who they are and what they're about. And everybody loves to talk about where they're from. I could get both of you to start doing it by just, feeding you a couple of small lines that are very innocuous. Like,
right. I'm going to come back to that, but I don't want you to go down that path yet, because that's actually one of my questions, my specific like tradecraft questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you're going to go somewhere, I would use engagement of people in a way that makes sense. That's what I would do, because everything Clint said is on the money. I mean, if you should have a tourniquet, you should have an idea of what kind of weapons are available. And if you're not a gun carrying person, I always believe in throwing something at someone who, if you have it, who intends to do you harm. You pick up a garbage can and throw it at them. They're going to have to deal with that. You have a book in your hand, you can throw it at them and create space. And I'm not trying to start throwing your book at everybody you see, but, just give them something to worry about if you're in an immediate tactical situation.
Okay, so again, I want to take this opportunity to turn the tables, and you both are very highly trained, and you're both male. Females have a different perspective on some things. So, Clint, if I am not comfortable carrying a knife, which a lot of women aren't comfortable carrying a knife or a gun, and Pete, you started to talk about it, these kind of improvised things, let's talk a couple minutes about what can you use if you're not comfortable carrying that. I mean, and it's kind of, if I'm not mistaken, it's thinking on your feet and being kind of innovative with the pen you have in your hand, or the hand sanitizer now that we all have, that can buy some time and create space by squirting it in somebody's eyes. But can you kind of just touch on that? If I'm not comfortable carrying a blade or a gun, which I didn't say I wasn't, but what could you substitute with that maybe you're more comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is everything is a weapon. So, when you talk about, environmental weapons is going into a place and going, okay, there's a curb, there's a hard edge, there's aluminum door frames, things that I can throw a body against and it hurts them. And then you have the improvised weapons, which is the things you can pick up and use against a bad guy. So it's literally anything. But, if you know that you're uncomfortable with something, then that is direction to get comfortable with something. Like, I hear it all the time where people spend a lifetime saying, well, I just don't like that, or I don't want to, what do I do if I don't know how to use it? Well, if you've already identified that you don't know how, well, then
do it.
Start doing it. It's like, for me, it's like, it doesn't even make sense. But, there's knives, there's guns, there's swords, there's a lot of options out there, but you just got to pick something and get comfortable with it is like the first thing I would say. And then it opens up the door to a lot of other stuff. When you're traveling, obviously you can't travel with a whole bunch of weapons, but you can get off the plane, and a little bit of that tradecraft is, I'm not going to go directly to my hotel, right? I'm going to stop somewhere and I'm going to do some cover for action and tell a story. I'm going to buy a block of cheese and a knife and an apple and some peanut butter, and I'm going to fill up my grocery bag and go check out. And then maybe I'll make my way to wherever lodging is for me. But I'm telling a story. But in that story, I just got everything I need to defend myself. Plus I've got, 72 hours worth of food I can keep in my rental car or whatever. But, once you learn just something or get comfortable with it, then all of a sudden it opens up the door to all of those improvised possibilities.
Is that changing a mindset? And this question is to both of you, because most people don't think like that. Like if they're sitting on a bus or a train and they're sitting on their phone, which we all have in our hand, and they start to feel uncomfortable and they're like, oh my God, especially women, this is a problem for us. We start to get fearful, but because we don't necessarily know what to do, we freeze. But I mean, is it take a mindset to like, oh, I have a device here that I can smash somebody's nose? My question is it changing a mindset so that you give yourself kind of permission to think differently?
I think
that makes sense.
I think it's just creativity. And like, once you kind of tell people, you'll see the little light bulbs go off, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay. And then they're like, yeah, I could take this. And, it's something, right? It's better than nothing. It's better than breaking your fist, we're, like I said, we're surrounded by stuff. And as soon as you open their eyes up to it, then they're like, oh, got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Pete, you have anything? And I'm laughing because I saw one of the comments slide up, and his name was Brad, said he uses his wit.
His wit, yeah. And Brad's a comedian.
I'm questioning, with your spy background and, the wit, is there a defense mechanism that you can engage somebody and kind of de-escalate it? Or, I don't know, just talk to me about what your
I wouldn't, it's just like working a gun, right? Everybody knows how to open their mouth and put words down range, but you would have to develop the skill to reliably do it in a situation. And sometimes it's an intuition, because I've done it a whole lot. I've talked to a lot of people. So I would say, I'm not saying don't talk your way out, but think through what it is. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just pre-thinking what the inevitable horrible situation would be. Before any patrol, you talk about the most likely and the most deadly courses of action that you might encounter. And what are we going to do about that? So if you get to somewhere, and I love the thing that Clint's saying about don't just go straight to your place, like go and, go around the neighborhood, check it out, go consume something, make a friend or whatever it is, because just racing to the hotel, it's comfortable, but doesn't necessarily make you safe. And then as a female, I think there's a couple of small things you can do. Like right here, I have a combat pen. This is a pen you can fly legally with, and it's just a pen. And so you could take something that's less masculine than this and carry it around, but it's not a plastic snappable off in your hand pen. It's a metal pen, and you're like, this is part of my defense. There's nothing wrong with carrying a pen at all. Mm-hmm. Those kind of things. And then if there's someone behind you, not to put all women in the same basket, but don't be afraid to take care of yourself. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. If someone's making you nervous, respond in a way, don't just be passive. So there's a number of things you can do. I taught my daughter this, like if they're right on top of you and they're attacking you, I want you bang your thumb off the back of their eye socket. Don't poke them in the eyes, poke them through the goddamn eye, all the way to the back of the skull, because no one wants to fight like that. And they're going to lose at least one hand holding their eye back together, And I'm not saying jam everybody's eye out, but if you're in a situation where you have to defend yourself decisively. You're overpowered by a man and you get one shot, I would try to do that. But before that, if you feel like someone's threatening you, turn and look and see if you can make an instant friend. Hey, there's someone, I think they're following behind me. Do you mind me just standing next to me here for a second? Could be a man, it could be a woman, but now there's two people looking at this person. And so if they have nefarious intent, you just change the odds substantially, and then you can quickly do that. But you have to decide that it's okay for me to be wrong about this. It's okay if I hurt someone's feelings because I feel threatened, right?
And I want to pause you there, because that is absolutely, I think, one of the biggest challenges for women is that girls are raised to be nice and more polite, and we are wired to not offend, to not humiliate, embarrass. So I think that, and I'm speaking for myself, and I know it because I've had this conversation with other women, we allow, to your point, Pete, ourselves to stay in an uncomfortable space because we don't, like, if we do feel someone walking up on us, we will second think about, like, well, I don't want to turn around in case it's nothing, or I don't want to turn around and put somebody on the spot. You said it. We have to get over being uncomfortable, being wrong. And if it's someone who is not a threat, you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to offend you. I felt somebody following me. So I guess, thank you for that permission, because I think we all need to hear it. And especially women. Guys don't worry about it as much as we do. Is like, well, if somebody compliments us, we feel like we have to take it, but it's uncomfortable and cringy sometimes. Do you have any advice or recommendations if we find ourselves in a situation that we don't like, some dude's talking to us and we are not enjoying the conversation and we don't know how to get out of it sometimes? Do you have any tips as from the guy's perspective of like, what would shut it down? Like, what should we have in our pocket to de-escalate or disengage? Is my question making sense? Because this is a real thing for us.
Saying. And this goes back to the same thing. Like, you have to pre-decide that I'm going to be decisive when I feel uncomfortable, and it's okay to take care of yourself. So if you're in a bar setting or whatever it is, and someone's coming on a little hard, just say, listen, I'm not into it. I appreciate you like me. I'm not here for that. And just decide, and then remove yourself from that situation. And if the dude follows you, then you got a different set of problems. But for the most part, you're just trying to let them know, hey, stop. This is not for me. Leave me alone, please.
Right. But in that moment, we're going to be like, we don't want to hurt his feelings, but we have no interest, but we don't want to hurt his feelings.
Fuck their feelings,
Yeah, that's what I would say. But
start there, and you can always apologize. You can always do that. You don't have to even do that. You just be decisive, act, and get away from the situation.
Yeah. Clint, you have anything? I see you kind of shifting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's okay, to be a dick, right? I mean, we don't have to be nice to everyone. And the reality is you're not going to see this person again. So who cares what they think, or, if you're worried about their feelings, they'll get over it, within 5 minutes.
Yeah, they'll go to the next easy.
Right. There you go. Yeah. And I noticed Pete says hard. He said a hard situation. I didn't know what he meant by that, but hard. I kind of keep up hard. Just saying.
I totally agree on this not apologizing thing. Like, you don't have to apologize. You don't owe them an apology. And if you feel like you've really screwed something up, offer to buy them a drink.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me buy you a drink. My apologies.
You would be shocked though how hard that is for some women to do. Like, they want to do it, but they just have reservations about it. So again, we allow ourselves to be uncomfortable, and it sucks. I was somebody, the reason I even got into this is I was somebody who traveled largely on my own at a young age for, a Fortune 100 company, 500 company. And I got myself in some pretty cringy situations because I did not recognize signs to stay away from it. So, one quick one is I know now you should never accept a ride from the people who troll and fish at the back of a taxi line. I did. It was LaGuardia because the line was like an hour long. It's before Uber. I mean, I don't want to age myself, but it was before Uber. And I knew I was going to be in line for an hour. So some guys fishing from the back, because that's where they fish, because they know you have the longest wait. And I accepted a ride from, one of the town car guys. And he grabbed my bag and started walking, and I'm following. He's got my bag. But then I start to realize, okay, now we're leaving the terminal. He's got my bag. We're getting away from people. Now we're walking towards this parking lot of black town cars. And I'm like, okay, oh shit, I've got myself in this. I want to get out of it. I had zero idea how. So I just stayed in it and let the hair on my arms raise. Now I'm walking. I'm like, I have no idea where we're going. No one knows I left. I mean, because I was traveling by myself. I don't know who's at the car. So it was just like, I didn't have the confidence or the courage to be like, you know what, I changed my mind. You guys would be like, give me my damn bag back. I'm going back. I did not have that confidence to do it. So I don't know, if you have anything that you would, now I know, don't take lines, don't take rides. That's the lesson learned, but nobody had really shared that with me. I had to kind of learn it. So, that was kind of the motivation for getting into the work that I do now, which is training women. And I base it a lot on the things I wish I would have known before I, set out on my professional career. And there are things I want my kids to know, my girls to know. But just kind of still going along that line, Pete, your background in getting intelligence out of people, how would we recognize if someone, or can we, if someone is striking up a conversation and they're just asking, like, how do we know if someone's trying to pump us for information and it's for, bad reasons, or if it's just a friendly conversation? Is there any cues that we should look for? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I'll do my best to answer it. One of the things I always say is, like, if you say, hey, where are the bombs, to the person you're trying to find bombs from, they usually don't respond to that question because it's too in your face.
Too obvious.
So if someone actually asks those kinds of questions, like, where are you going? Where are you staying? You're like, I'm just not telling you that, that's stuff that you don't have to give away. So you can be friendly, like, yeah, I'm here for a conference or whatever it is, right? Yeah, I'm here, I don't know, a little bit of fun, a little bit of work, just be vague about it. You can be nice and not answer directly these things. But if someone's determined to find this out, it's going to take them some time if they're going to be crafty about it. So I think the biggest thing you're probably trying to look for is that upfront straight attack. Like, I am going to try to find someone who will respond to these questions, and that person will self-select into my situation. So that's what you're trying to, I think, initially defeat, is that self-selection process. Just don't be quite so cooperative. You can be nice, you can be smiling, all those things, but you don't have to answer those where are the bomb questions, like, hey, where are you staying?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, out of friends, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm. So I shared a cringy story of mine. You guys have been in so many more situations than I could ever dream of. But, Clint, you talked about turning into the crowd of people. Do you have another cringy story that, maybe happened when you were in the field, and just kind of how'd you get out of it? And especially making any connections into what we could apply as a...
Yeah. Social unrest is a big one, but probably outside of that is, like, I think it takes a while for, like, guys in my world to realize that, yeah, you're there to do something, but you're still open to all those other issues that everyone faces, right? One of the instances was something that went on in the media that directly affected me, and I had been working all day, and then that night got a call that was like, hey, get out of there. I'm like, oh, what? And so get out of there meant wait 3 hours, and her craft lands at some strip, and then you get on it and you leave, kind of thing, right? So it leaves a lot of time for anything to go wrong. But once, where I was, there was, I guess a bunch of angry people coming my way. And the interesting backstory to that is that day I was being introduced. This is a control issue, right? So I'm being introduced by someone I was with in a different language as a Danish veterinarian, right? And he's telling everybody that. And then midway through, I'm like, what are you telling them? And he's like, Danish veterinarian, everybody loves the Danes. And I'm like, okay. And so he keeps doing that all day long, right? Well, what happened is that night is when the newspaper came out and published the illustration of Muhammad, and it was a Danish illustrator. So the whole day, remember that? He did a half like human, half dog illustration.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Anyway, so the day that came out, now all of a sudden, here I've been, and he was right? And everybody loves the Danes, and there was nothing wrong all the way up until that day. And all of a sudden, the entire Muslim world hated the Danes. So, and I've been introduced all day long as a Danish veterinarian. So, there was, unbeknownst to me, there was definitely chatter that was picked up about coming and killing this, Danish veterinarian. And so, before you know it, I'm like having to, juke left, go right, and do all kinds of crazy stuff just so that I could get out of there without being massacred. But it was a lesson learned in that, you can't letting people no matter their intentions, letting them kind of guide things in that false, that's like way false, right? In Pete's world, he knows better than I do. It's like you stay as close to the truth as you can. And that is always your goal, right? Because it's the truth that ends up protecting you if things do go sideways. So, I didn't have control of that. And it kind of, and who would have thought, right? That was just, the odds were against me on that particular day.
Did I miss, why were you being introduced as a Danish veterinarian? Did I miss that of the story?
Yeah, that's a much longer. Probably.
Oh,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
A long story.
You'd have to kill me if you told me.
No, it's just, it would just add a considerable amount of time to the discussion.
Pete, you got any cringy stories that we can learn from of
Yeah. I mean, again, from my side of the world, right? And I've worked with guys like Clint before. We go out, we approach these problems differently, which is what makes a team powerful when we go out and do these things. But before I learned really how to do this early in my spy days, we had to go to a bar in Bosnia. And it was a mission where you got to understand, first off, our teams are super small teams. It's 4 people, right? And half of us have pistols. One of us, me in this case, is working, not like focused on my weapons. My job is to focus on my conversation that I'm having. So to plan this operation, we really can't defend ourselves, reliably. And we're going to this bar full of ne'er-do-wells, bikers, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like a really dangerous place. And we've never been there before. So we don't know enough to know anything about it, but we have to go do this job. And the unit was trying to decide, the larger unit was trying to decide if it was worth sending us into this situation because it was full of bad people. And so my basic plan was basically just do a dead man switch and just have a grenade in my hand. And if things went sideways, hold it up and walk out, which is terrifying. And it was an option. The more, and we did that. But then I realized we were safer with the pin in the grenade and no dead man switch, and we'd be all right because I got there and I got comfortable with what was going on. But with the unknown, it was terrifying. So what I realized with that mission and a bunch of other ones is that for the most part, on a CI team, a counterintelligence spy team, you really can't fight your way out of a situation. It's nice to have something to point back, but we have to protect ourselves with culture and charm more than anything else. That's our lead weapon. And since most of us are more like that, and we're not a SEAL team, you need to understand that there are a lot of charm-based, cultural-based weapons that you have at your disposal that you can use to get yourself out of a situation. So,
give 2 examples of that when you're saying you have these tools, these culture and charm tools, like apply it to something. Apply it to something that the average person, not necessarily your.
One thing I want to say too, before we get too further, a lot of this stuff is gray zone, right? Like you're not sure A or B or F, whatever option it's going to be. And you have to be comfortable that a lot of things don't have an obvious answer. And that's why simply getting away from it is probably the best answer to give yourself time. So examples of how to do this is, it's again, simply ask a person where they're from, and you can know something about that region and ask the question in a wrong way. So I can say, hey, you're from Indiana. You guys are, you guys hate basketball. And you'd be like, no, idiot, we love basketball. And now you're talking. You can't help it. You have to talk about basketball. Even if you're not a person who loves basketball in Indiana, that is part of who you guys are. So now I've got you in the conversation with you talking to me a whole bunch. And now I have not more control, but I have you thinking less about what you're saying and you're more responding from the heart. These are the kind of things you're looking for. If you compliment someone on their hospitality, and you say, gosh, people in Indiana are the most hospitable people I think I've ever met. This is really God's country. There's no person in Indiana that's going to be like, no, you're wrong. It's horrible. Maybe they'll say you're wrong. Maybe they hate it there. But for the most part, they're going to agree that their hospitality is good and that Indiana is a good place. And so you're working from a positive perspective and you're allowing them to be them. You can protect yourself with that person. Now you've made them a little bit more your friend. You've established a little bit of rapport, And then and another thing is think about, when people talk about rapport and trust, they don't really have a systemized way of approaching it. So when you talk about trust, like you extended trust to that guy with the town car service, and then you realize that it was probably too high of a risk of trust and you wanted to retract it. You're trying to balance these things out. Someone says they're going to show up at 2:00. Hey, they're there at 2:00. Okay, great. That's a little coin, it's a little bit of trust you guys have exchanged. You can ratchet it up from there and see, where it goes. But it's a feeling thing, I think, as you do it, but you want to test that trust. As those feelings start to go left and right, not where you think they're going to go, don't be afraid to abort and say, I don't trust this because I don't know this person. I don't know them that well. Or say, this is a bet, but I'm going to go ahead and go with this person. I had to bet all the time to survive. I've been in the cars of foreign national people with nothing but maybe a radio in my hand, because that's where I had to go to develop the trust and to get to the information that no one else can get to, because you can't go with a platoon of people, right? So having a calculated risk is what guys like Clint and I did all the time. There's always calculated risk.
Clint, do you have any thoughts on like any of your, again, I call it tradecraft. I don't know if that's the right word, but just something that you could apply to the average person? And I'm going to say female. I'm going to say female just because.
I think what Pete's saying, like rapport is like a weapon in itself. So building good rapport. I tell people all the time, the business card you collect from someone in wherever you are, well, those people will help you long before the State Department will. So if you're building good rapport and you're collecting that information and you've got it, like if something did go sideways and you end up in jail, those people are going to help you way faster and be able to do more than, the almighty State Department, which I personally would have zero trust in. So not to get me out anytime soon. So that's, I think, from what Pete's saying, that's what I always drew from it was, hey, you want to make friends anytime you can, because that friend may end up being your best ally when things go a little sideways for you.
So one of you touched upon it earlier, but the whole idea and importance of blending in and blending in, domestically is one thing, but can both of you talk about just kind of why, put some context around why it's important to blend in and maybe leaving the bling at home when you're going abroad. And I've heard that like backpacks and company logos and U.S. sports teams make you a target. So can you just kind of expound upon, and I actually have a very personal reason for asking this. My daughter is an international and global studies major. She's going to have to go, she's required to study abroad. I am pretty sure that she and even her generation, just no one has ever told them the importance of going over and blending in, and our borders are the world is a much smaller place now. So you might not want to wear what you would typically wear, going to the mall here when you're going overseas, and just putting some context around why that is.
I definitely talked about projection demeanor management, and that is blending in, and it's more than just what you're wearing. It's how you present yourself. It's the words you use. You got a lot of former military. They'll sit in the lobby of a hotel overseas and you can peg them because they'll be like, where's the head? Oh, let's meet down the lobby at 1800. And, they're using all this jargon. And right off the bat, exactly who they are and their background within seconds. So, think of, how you blend in. It's not just leave the jewelry home and, make sure you wear neutral colored clothing and, stay away from, obviously the big logos and all that, we call them bullseyes and, anything that represents America. Sometimes it's a good idea just to, you want to try and make people go, wait a minute. You want them to question exactly who you could be, right? There's plenty. I've been in the deepest, darkest areas of Africa, and there are white people there. And when I look at them, I know that they're not American. And why is that? Well, it's because how they present themselves from afar, how they're dressed. And, so if you are like me, there's this white guy going into these areas, then you have to really figure out, how do I make people question whether I'm American or not from afar? And so it all has to do with a little bit of, you got to do your research on the culture. You've got to know what you're about to step into, and then build how you dress to those dynamics. You want to wear what they're close to what they're wearing that makes sense, right? I'm not going to put on a thobe and a gutra when I'm hanging out in Saudi, because people are going to go, okay, why is this dude wearing a man dress and his gutra, and but I know the limitations of what I could get away with, so that when people look at me, they go, oh, maybe he's from France, maybe he's from South Africa. There's you want to just confuse it to a certain degree, but ideally the ultimate goal, and I tell people all the time, when you're sitting at the international terminal at an airport and we all people watch, the people that you pay attention to are the ones that you don't want to be like. You want to be that person in the background that just skirts by and you didn't even see them, right? I used to have to tell team guys, SEALs, like going through different training, like, I hate to say it, but it's like you have to like take that alpha male and like, pussify him to a certain degree. You got to take off the Solomons, put on the penny loafers, take off that Sunto watch and put on a Casio little, you want to be boring. You want to be unattractive. Your clothes don't need to fit all tight. If you got some intimidating tattoos, and you probably want to cover them up. I mean, some of this is just common sense, but yeah, you're right. There's not too much common sense these days. I'll stop there.
Yeah, Pete, you got anything to add?
Yeah, sure. And I agree with everything Clint's saying. I love gray manning things. I love just being invisible. It's one of my favorite things when I'm in Germany and someone says, ask me in German for directions. That means I'm doing my job. Let's just say you're bound and determined to wear something more blingy and more American. Again, that's fine. You're just trying to recognize a situation that could get out of hand ahead of time. I'll give you a little story. So we were in Egypt just after 9/11. This is in October, and we were going out to all the antiquity sites. This is as a military group, and we're all wearing civilian clothes, but they're all civilian clothes that we probably bought at the PX in Egypt. So it's still kind of like military clothes. So we were there, and you had to dress modestly. And there was a young, attractive female who had a sweater set on. This does not sound super sexy. She had, big boobs and all that, but the Army's like, hey, you have to cover that up. She's like, what? Cover what up? I'm completely covered up. I have a sweater set on, and they're like, well, it's too sexy. And so she went and bought a sweatshirt or whatever, right, to kind of desexify it. We get to the pyramids, and there's probably a Polish girl, some kind of Czech, some kind of, Eastern European type chick, tube top, tiny shorts, no bra, bouncing all over the the area. And so just don't get too crazy about this. You can blend in a way that is you, but you're trying not to stand out. Don't catch someone's eye. So like if you've got the super blingy phone case, maybe don't bring that. Maybe get a travel case that's more modest, because there are people that are preying on tourists. They absolutely are, and they're going to try a bunch of different ways. It is the major, like you go to Mexico, it's the major leagues of getting kidnapped, of being having your money stolen from, by taking you to an ATM or whatever. They are a pro at this. You are fish. And so you want to try to avoid being that. So if you insist on wearing those kind of clothes, take appropriate measures to make sure that you're not alone and in well-lit spaces. I mean, you can do it. You just have to account for it.
Is there anything in particular, again, I'm trying to get the female perspective here, that you would say different, applying it specifically to a female situation? And maybe not, but is there anything else you want to staple on to what you've said that would be specific to women?
I mean, I think specifically, and it's as uncomfortable for women in this country to hear, but in most countries in the world, you need a squire. You need someone with you, because if you're alone, you will stand out. It doesn't matter what kind of clothes you wear. You're a woman out and about. And it doesn't mean you have to wear hijab or anything else. You don't have to ape someone else's culture to do it. You should have a man around, because
but
it's
that's
going
a
to
culture thing, right? And that's kind of what Clint was saying. Know the culture you're going. You don't have to go in there and be, like, I refuse to, because that's actually just can be ignorant. I mean, it's you're very savvy by understanding what you're going into, and it's not that you're letting go of any of your womanhood or strength. It's just being smart. It's the smarter thing. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a thing called CQ, cultural intelligence, basically, right? And you're using culture against your advantage that way. Yes, you're from a culture where women are empowered, and we all love that. Now you're in a different place where women, how many countries in the world can a man walk up to a woman and strike her because she didn't comply with some kind of, edict from the Quran or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of places like that. And so if you think that you can walk around with a chip on your shoulder, you're mistaken, because you stand the risk of being corrected, and potentially lethally so in some places.
Right.
So, and I'm not trying to scare people, but it's okay to work within their norm to keep yourself safe. That's that cultural protection thing I was talking about earlier. If this is what they do it. And you don't have to wear a hijab. You can keep your hair out. Then they know you're not Islamic, but you have to have someone around to kind of vouch for you.
Well,
and that's
it's respectful too, right? I mean, you're showing respect for the culture.
Maybe. I mean, it just depends on what that culture is, right? And so you don't get to determine what's respectful, they do. And so ask them to determine. We shouldn't be afraid of culture. We should learn how to work within it and have acuity, so that whatever cultural situation you end up in, that you're in the right position to be able to let that culture protect you. Bringing your culture exclusively is not going to. So I would say, you know, head coverings, whatever. If folks there like you have to cover up more, then cover up more. But if they don't, I don't know how many times I've had Islamic men say, yeah, we don't care what you do at Ramadan. You're a Christian. Now, whether I'm a Christian or not, doesn't even matter to them. They just know I'm not them. And so, yeah, you can drink your water. Yeah, you can have a sandwich. It's my job to suffer through Ramadan, not yours, you know? So use culture to your advantage. Don't use your ego to your disadvantage.
Right. Clint, you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I think that's good. I mean, I've in other, some of the other books, I've broken it down where those are the 4 pieces of awareness. You have situational, you have your personal, which we've covered. That's how you dress, your demeanor. You have cultural awareness, which we've hit on. You know, you got to know all these things. And then, of course, third party awareness is the one that you can't control unless you pay attention to the first 3. And so as long as you're paying attention to your personal awareness, situational, and cultural, then that third party piece, that's where you become gray.
All right. I know we're coming up on an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. But my last question to both of you: if you're going to give 2 pieces of advice, 3 pieces of advice to your wife, your daughter, your sister, your mother, what would it be in general for women? What are the 2, 3 things we should really get comfortable doing and should practice, make it a habit? Just your parting wisdom for women.
For women, I'll go first, and I'll keep it simple based on the, some of the stuff I just got finished diving into, and that's on the combative side. If you have someone, if it's a confrontational moment, face to face, zone awareness, right? This is a drill that mom and daughters can do right now, and that is stand, 10, 15 feet apart, and one just slowly walks towards the other. And you'll know that moment when it's like, okay, that's the limit. That's the danger zone. So know what that is. Know what that feeling is. Once somebody gets that, all the way up to nose, and then step back and do it again. And so in the world of combatives, that's your zone awareness, right? And know that inside the zone, there is the second piece of advice, just so you have something you can do to get better, is the reactionary gap. Okay. The reactionary gap is just like that game we all used to play. You put your hands out and, you put palm to palm, and then you try to slap the palm, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to do the same thing. But the difference is if I'm standing face to face with you and I tell you, hey, I'm just going to reach out and I'm going to thump you in the chest, and I want you to block it, I'm going to hit you in the chest every single time. So understand the reactionary gap, meaning if you're inside striking zones, then you need to be the first one to strike if you want to win, right? Because I can tell you can tell me that you're going to hit me in the chest, and I'm still not going to block it. That's how the reactionary gap works. So if you're inside my danger zone, then I know, okay, I'm going to have to take action first, because if I let them, then I'm going to lose this game, right? Unless I get lucky and they miss or something. But why take that chance? And then when you're outside that gap, then that's right. You can, and obviously through all of this, you de-escalate through posture and communication, and you're always looking to exit left, right, get off the X as soon as possible. But I feel like these days, it's you're always looking for the exit. You always want to de-escalate and stop whatever potential violence is about to happen. But it doesn't stop there, right? You have to have that zone awareness, and you need to understand the reactionary gap so that you can live another day. And it's something that, like I said, everyone can practice right now at home and know what that feels like, and then leverage it anytime you're out and about, or you find yourself in that bar situation you were talking about, right? That's most of these guys are getting inside the reactionary gap. And if they make the first move, then you're going to probably have a hard time coming out on top.
Yep. And I just want you to state it again. It is okay to offend or not worry about hurting feelings. I mean, that is always that pause that we have. Like, oh, I don't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah, I think it's right. It's a thoughtful step-by-step process. You're not going to come out of the gates verbally swinging, right? You want to at least try to be polite and de-escalate, or let them know, hey, I'm not comfortable with what's going on. No offense. I just had a bad day. Or, hey, let me buy you a drink. Hey, bartender, blah, 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 blah. And then exit left, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to get yourself out of it. And those are the things you should do first before you go, hey, fuckface, I'm not comfortable with you being here. So get out of my way, or, whatever it is. Anyway, kill them with kindness first before you kill them with your fist.
Okay. Pete.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everything Clint's saying is on the money. So I'll just try to take some different angles and different perspectives. And he's 100% right. Like, you need to decide when too close is too close. And that's not just physical. That can be mental, or dominating in some other way or whatever. As a female, you can always look, if you've been targeted for something and you're worried about that, you don't have to be right or wrong. Just like, if you feel that, that's great. Change the odds. Find someone else to be a friend. Now, I know that girls like to travel in packs, so we'll just leave the obvious thing alone. Like, yeah, of course, have someone with you. But if you don't have someone with you, or your someone is somewhere else, turn to that person next to you and make a friend and say, hey, I could use your help. I need a favor. If someone turned to Clint right now and said, hey, I'd use a favor, can you just stand here for a second and talk to me? Yeah. He's always going to say yes. That person's always, and if not, the person next to them. And the next thing you know, like, you're looking for help and someone's going to give it to you. But the other thing I would say is it's easy to say, but try to be aware of your surroundings and practice this when you're not in a dangerous situation, so that you can start to become more comfortable in these situations. You're not supposed to be good at this right away. So, like, when you go to the grocery store, do you know other ways to get out besides the two front doors? Have you ever looked, just poke your head back there? No one's going to get mad if you are like, oh, there is an exit and it's straight back that way. Or do I have to go through the break room? Know these things, practice understanding it and kind of intuiting eventually where the routes are that are alternate. Because if everybody's running out the front door and you're running out the back, you're going to be one of the few people doing that. You're going to get the heck out of there. And again, don't wait. Act decisively. When the fire alarm goes off at work, and even if it's a fire drill, try to be the first person to safely get out of the building. Recognize that danger and act, because freeze is an absolute natural response. Flight, everybody says fight and flight, but freeze is one of them. And sometimes freeze can be used to find the best way out. Take that moment to act, but then act decisively. So find a friend, act decisively, know your routes to get away from the threat. And I think you'll be in a much better position. Oh, and it's okay for things to feel uncomfortable as you try to learn how to do these things. Culture's not comfortable all the time as you try to learn how to navigate through it. Dangerous situations aren't comfortable until you've been, practicing how to deal with those things. And all of a sudden you'll find out that discomfort that you don't like is really miscomfort, and you learn how to remanage it and go, this isn't that dangerous. I know how to manage and mitigate this risk.
Great. Thanks. Well, we're up on an hour. Thank you both so much. This was insightful. Clint, if anyone wants to find you, where do they go? And tell us about your next project that you have coming up.
Yeah, ClintEmerson.com. I try to keep that up to date. But there's a lot of, if you just Google any of that, you'll find plenty of information, almost too much. But the next book, the 100 Deadly Skills Combat Edition, is coming out here at the end of the month. That one is turned out to be pretty cool because it's the first comprehensive combatives book, from hand to hand, knife, pistol, rifle, and beyond. And it has like almost 100 videos embedded into the illustrations, so that you learn directly from the experts that I kind of went out and put in it. So just look for that. I think that's probably the coolest thing in a long time, so that people can better protect themselves.
Great. Pete, any plug? I know if they're watching this now, they're hopefully already subscribed.
Subscribe to the Break It Down Show. If you're on wherever you're watching it, subscribe or hit me up, Pete at breakitdownshow.com. I'm glad to talk to you and fill in the blanks wherever you need them. Breakitdownshow.com or Pete A. Turner on all social media, and I'm pretty accessible with that. And then also, Shelley, plug your stuff because what you're doing is important as well.
Yeah, so I do some training and some speaking, and I primarily focus on female audiences just because that's where I can connect and that's where I have stories to share that are relatable. But you can connect with me on Facebook, or you can visit stilettoagency.com, and I would love to talk to you. And again, I sincerely thank you for this opportunity. I hope that the listeners walked away with something, and anytime you need a sub, let me know.
All right, you got it. All right, I'm going to press stop on this thing.